Welcome, MMA fans, to the very first edition of Knuckle Game Spotlight, a new series from Knuckle Game Podcast where we go beyond wins and losses, beyond statistics, beyond fight week, to tell the stories that shape the athletes we watch every Saturday night. Because here, we don't just ask who won, we ask, how did they get so damn good? What made them different? What sacrifices were made when nobody was watching? Today, we're shining the spotlight on one of the fastest rising names in mixed martial arts, Joshua Van. If you've only recently started hearing his name, you're not alone. But make no mistake, the rest of the flyweight division has known about him for much longer. By the end of this episode, you'll understand why so many people believe Joshua Van isn't simply chasing greatness. He may be on the verge of becoming it. Now, before the octagon, every fighter has an origin story. Some are built inside famous gyms. Some are born into fight families. Others are shaped by circumstances far beyond the walls of a martial arts academy. Joshua Van's story begins long before bright lights, championship dreams, and UFC walkouts. Before he became one of the most exciting young flyweights in the world, he was simply a young man looking for an opportunity. Nothing about his path was guaranteed. No fast track, no shortcuts, no famous last name opening doors. Just determination and an unwavering belief that hard work could change his future. That belief would eventually carry him across continents, into a gym, and toward a career that very few people ever achieve. Because becoming a UFC fighter isn't simply about learning how to punch. It's about surviving every reason people tell you that you can't. For Joshua Van, that fight started long before anyone locked the octagon door. And in many ways, those early battles would become the greatest advantages of his career. Now, every young fighter walks into a gym believing they know what fighting looks like, or what fighting is, or how to fight. Then they spar, and reality has a funny way of introducing itself in the fight gym. A bloody nose, bruised rib, a punch you never saw coming. Those moments have humbled future champions for generations. Joshua Van was no different. Some people discover very quickly that they don't enjoy getting hit. Others discover something entirely different. That the harder the challenge, the more alive they feel. For Joshua Van, fighting wasn't about looking tough. It wasn't about social media. It wasn't about proving he was the baddest man in the room. It became a craft, an obsession, a puzzle that demanded complete commitment. Day after day, round after round. He wasn't chasing fame, nah. He was chasing improvement. And that's an important distinction, because fighters who chase attention eventually hit a ceiling. And fighters who chase mastery keep getting better. Now, you can see it in Joshua Van every time he competes. Nothing he throws feels wasted. Every jab has a purpose. Every combination sets something else up. Every movement is calculated. That doesn't happen overnight. It comes from thousands of hours. Long after the cameras are gone, long after everybody else has gone home. That's where real fighters are made. Now, one of the biggest misconceptions fans have is believing the UFC is filled with overnight successes. It isn't. So stop it. It isn't. By the time a fighter reaches the octagon, they've usually spent years competing in small venues, fighting in front of a few hundred people, sometimes for very little money, driving themselves to events, sleeping in cheap hotels and motels, working regular jobs between training camps. Come on, man. The bright lights of the UFC are built on years spent in the dark. Joshua Van paid those dues. Every regional fight became another classroom. Every opponent taught him something. How to stay composed when things weren't going his way. How to win ugly when necessary. How to remain patient when the finish wasn't there. Those lessons don't show up on a record, but they become invaluable under the bright lights of the UFC. Look, man, the regional scene doesn't hand out world championships, but it does build the habits required to chase one. Now, the UFC call. Every fighter dreams about it. The phone rings. The UFC is on the other end. Years of sacrifice suddenly become one question. Are you ready? Most fighters say yes. So the question really isn't whether they're willing. The question is whether they're actually prepared. Because once you enter the UFC, nobody cares how impressive you looked somewhere else. The competition changes, man. The speed changes. The pressure changes. Every mistake becomes more expensive. Joshua Van stepped into the world's premier MMA organization carrying everything he'd built before that moment. Not hype, not promises, experience, preparation, confidence. Confidence earned the hard way, man. And almost immediately, the fans started noticing something different. He wasn't overwhelmed. He didn't fight like someone grateful to be there. He fought like someone who expected to stay. There's a difference. One mindset's about survival. The other's about competing. And Joshua Van, he came to compete. Oh, yeah. And with every performance, that confidence became impossible to ignore. Now, why is everybody talking about Joshua Van? Why is he the hot boy? Here's what separates good prospects from future contenders. Consistency, man. Anybody could have one spectacular night. Anybody could land one perfect punch. Anybody could catch lightning in a bottle. The truly dangerous fighters, they repeat excellence. Joshua Van, he began putting together the kind of performances that forced people to pay attention. Fans noticed, analysts noticed, matchmakers noticed, and perhaps most importantly, the fighters in his own division noticed, or was put on notice. Because the flyweight division has always been one of the UFC's deepest talent pools, man. There are no easy fights there. No free rankings. Every climb up the ladder has to be earned, without a doubt. No question. No VIP passes, man. Joshua Van, he wasn't asking for respect. He was taking it one fight at a time, one round at a time, one clean combination at a time. Man, the further he climbed, the louder the conversation became, man. Y'all didn't recognize that? Every fight, Maybe this kid is special. Maybe we're watching the future. Maybe the next generation of flyweights has already arrived. And that's when expectations change. People stop asking whether you belong and start asking, can you defend? Now let's talk about the science of Joshua Van. Here's where Joshua Van starts to separate himself from a lot of young prospects. It's not just what he does, it's why he does it. Some fighters rely on athleticism. Others rely on toughness. Joshua Van, he relies on understanding. And just watch him, man. Watch him closely. Don't follow his punches. Follow his feet. Before he throws, he's already created angles. He's already taken away your escape. That's veteran thinking. And remember, he's still incredibly young. One thing you'll notice almost immediately is that Joshua Van rarely rushes himself. He's patient. He'll touch you with the jab, take away your rhythm, make you react. Then almost without warning, the combinations start flowing. Big bop, big bop. 3 punches, 4 punches, 5 punches. Not wild, not reckless. Everything connected. Everything smooth, man. Everything balanced. His head ain't over his knee. He ain't leaning forward. He's not chasing highlights. He's chasing clean, repeatable offense. That's championship behavior. Which brings us to the next chapter. Composure under fire. Now, one of the hardest things to teach in fighting is composure. Every gym teaches combinations. Every coach teaches takedown defense. Every fighter hits mitts. But nobody can teach you how to stay calm when another professional fighter is trying to separate you from consciousness and fly your head. That comes from experience. Joshua Van has developed something coaches love to see. He doesn't panic. Watch his eyes during his exchanges. Most young fighters be blinking and backing away, freezing. Joshua Van doesn't. He watches. He processes. He adjusts. He makes the adjustment. Then he answers. That's fight IQ. And fight IQ ages better than speed because eventually every fighter loses a step. The smart ones keep winning anyway. Now, success changes things. When you're climbing the rankings, everyone underestimates you. You're the hungry prospect, the dangerous newcomer, the guy nobody has tape on. Then something changes. Suddenly, everyone is studying you. They're breaking down your tendencies, looking for weaknesses, building game plans specifically for you. Now, that's where many prospects hit a wall. Not because they stop improving, but because everyone else finally starts preparing for them. Joshua Van has entered that phase of his career. He isn't surprising people anymore. He's expected to win. That's a completely different kind of pressure. And pressure reveals everything. Can you continue evolving even after the division catches up? Champions can. We'll soon find out if Joshua Van can too. Now, Every contender eventually reaches the same place. The road ends at the champion's doorstep. For Joshua Van, that former champion is Alexandre Pantoja. And this isn't just another opponent. This is one of the most complete flyweights the UFC has ever seen. A man who's fought the best, beat the best, defended the belt, and earned every ounce of respect he carries. For years, Pantoja has been the measuring stick, the question every rising contender eventually has to answer. Are you really ready? Joshua Van represents something equally dangerous: youth, momentum, confidence, the belief that tomorrow belongs to him. And when those two forces collide, combat sports gives us something special. Not just a fight, a moment. One generation protecting its throne, another trying to take it away. So, why does Joshua Van matter? Why does he matter? Sometimes a fighter becomes popular because they talk. Sometimes because they create controversy. Sometimes because they know how to sell a fight. Joshua Van is becoming popular for the oldest reason in combat sports. He can fight. Oh yeah, he can thump. Fans recognize authenticity. They recognize discipline. They recognize a fighter who keeps showing up, who keeps improving, and lets his performances speak louder than the interviews could ever. That's why his fan base keeps growing. That's why the UFC keeps giving him bigger and bigger opportunities. And that's why people inside the sport believe we've only seen the beginning. Joshua Van isn't carrying the expectations of becoming the next anybody. He's building his own legacy. One fight, one lesson, and one performance at a time. And it's stunning. And whether he leaves his next challenge with UFC gold still around his waist or with another lesson that fuels his journey, one thing is already clear. The future of the flyweight division isn't coming. It's already here. Now, Joshua Van's story is still being written. That's what makes it exciting. We're not looking back on a completed legacy. We're witnessing one take shape in real time. Years from now, we'll know exactly where this journey led. But today, we have the privilege of watching the climb. If you've enjoyed this edition of Knuckle Game Spotlight, let me know in the comments which fighter deserves the spotlight next. Should we follow a champion, a rising contender, or another name that's changing the landscape of mixed martial arts? Until next time, I'm El Benga, and this is Knuckle Game Spotlight, where we don't chase headlines, we chase understanding. Keep your hands up and your chin tucked.